The recording has now started, and with this, I hand over to you, Nora.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Norah McRae. I'm the Associate Provost for Cooperative and Experiential Education at the University of Waterloo, and also one of the co-chairs for the World Association. And so it's wonderful to be invited to speak to this group and to share some of my perspective on work integrated learning broadly. And thank you, Benjamin, for handling the slide deck, and I'll just cue you each time. So if you want to turn to the next slide. The tradition that we have in Canada is when we give a presentation is to acknowledge the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples where we're located. So in the case of the University of Waterloo, I just want to acknowledge that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, which was the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work toward reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Office of Indigenous Relations. Next slide. Thank you. So when we think about work integrated learning, and this won't be a new concept to you at all, but just wanted to contextualize it in the context that we live in right now, which is probably increasingly relevant and valid, which is that context of VUCA. So VUCA is that a situation is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which certainly describes the world in which we're living right now. It seems to change every day. And of course, certainly from a Canadian perspective, we're facing all sorts of uncertainties right at the minute. And also a shift towards what we are in Industry 4.0 and towards Industry 5.0. And as we think about the changes towards 4 to 5, we're moving from increasing adoption of AI and robots and how we have to be training our students to be working within that environment. Sometimes as employees, sometimes as not employees, as entrepreneurs or innovators themselves. But as AI and automation and technology just exponentially seem to be changing the employment landscape, we need to be thinking in our programs and work integrated learning about how we are helping to prepare our students for that. So that's the focus or the thinking about what we're doing within a broader context, because of course, work integrated learning is all about connecting what students are learning to the world of work. So we're always very sensitive to what's happening. And here's some quotes I think that are useful for us. And really, as we are leaders or thinking about work integrated learning, or educators or industry who are concerned about talent, how we adapt and adjust is very important, and work integrated learning is one strategy for that. Next slide. So just to focus in on the future of work, in addition to industry, in addition to uncertainty, here are some 6 key areas that we think about at the University of Waterloo. We have a research institute called the Work Learn Institute, which does research in what cooperative education or work integrated learning is relevant for those programs. And we did some research about a year or 2 ago on the future of work and what are some key themes that we need to be thinking about. Advances in technology. I've also made a bit of reference to that. I just talked about AI, but of course there are many other advances in technology. Skill, agility, and transferability. This is the concept that what one learns as a skill needs to be able to be transferred into a number of different contexts. So you may learn something within a classroom setting, and work integrated learning provides you the opportunity to apply it in a workplace, for example, or in different workplaces over the course of your program. The concept of responsibility for adaptation really speaks to the fact that we are all responsible for adapting and supporting our students to adapt. And that means, in my case, a university and what we're doing to prepare our students, governments, because there is a responsibility for governments to be thinking about how to make sure their citizens are skilled appropriately for changes, industry, to ensure that they are supporting their workers to be adaptable and to have the capabilities to adapt. And of course, the individual learner themselves has a responsibility to be adaptive. The next box here is EDIR. In our space, that's equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism. This is really that in the future of work, we are needing to think very carefully about how to remove barriers so that all people can show up in the future of work in the way that makes sense for them, that they can be their best selves in workplaces and not be held back by prejudices and things that don't accommodate specific needs or respect specific cultures or traditions. Gig economy and precarious work. We know that the workplace is changing. The notion of someone going to a university, having a career, staying in that career forever and ever is changing in most countries. And what's taking its place is this concept of gig economy, where someone might work for short periods of time with different projects or different organizations and shift from one gig or small piece of work to another, which does allow for a great deal of adaptability, but is also quite precarious in the sense of not being able to plan out into the future. And this concept of gig and precarious work just seems to be increasing in the future of work. And the final theme is employee versus organizational values. For many of our workplaces, we have different generations within the workplace, everything from boomer generations, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and soon, probably in 5-10 years, we'll have the Alpha generation. And each one has its own set of values and sees themselves and their workplaces and their colleagues differently, and how they interact is different. And so managing these different expectations in the future of work is going to be very important as well, to ensure, again, that we get the best out of everyone and everyone can show up in a good way in our workplaces. Next slide. So let's talk about work integrated learning specifically. Work integrated learning is a subset of experiential learning or experiential education, which is not, experiential learning has been around for a long time, and it's basically hands-on learning where a learner is taking what they've studied and they're applying it to a problem or a situation, and they're, through the application, are deepening their understanding of that concept. That's basically experiential learning. What makes work integrated learning a subset of that is that it is not only applying theory in practice, but it really is applying that within a workplace. And it involves a third party, usually an employer or an industry partner or a community partner, where the application of that learning is towards an outcome that that third party, whether it's an employer or a community, is looking for. So it's got this concept of three parties: the educational institution that's providing the training, the student, which is learning, and then the partner, which is the employer or the host organization where that learning is being applied. So that makes work integrated learning, again, very different. The other piece about it is that it really is, one of its goals is to develop career-related outcomes. So learning how to be in the workplace, how to get an opportunity, how to interact with supervisors, all of that, those workplace skills are also part of one of the goals of work integrated learning, as well as learning about the student, learning about what they're studying and about themselves. So in the next slide, I think. This is how we feel, those of us in the field of work integrated learning feel that it really is a great strategy for preparing students for the future of work, because it helps students when they're in those situations of going from the classroom into workplaces. It really helps them understand what they're learning and apply it towards problems that are increasingly complicated and challenging. So it really is exposing them to real world issues and helping them understand what they're studying and how that relates. For companies or employers or community organizations that take on a student, a very key motivation is being able to identify talent. This continues to be a really important concern for organizations is how do they get the right talent into their company? How do you recruit? How do you hire? How do you keep them there and understand how to have that talent stay with you? So this is why work integrated learning is a terrific strategy for companies that want to identify talent. And then for institutions like myself, our own institution, University of Waterloo, it really helps our faculty and our programs provide that understanding, that relevance, that motivation, so that when students learn something in the classroom and then they apply it in workplaces and then they come back to that classroom, it puts a whole different perspective on their learning and deepens their motivation and understanding of the theoretical concepts. And it helps us as an institution continue to develop learners to be ready for the future of work. Next slide, please. So let's talk about work integrated learning around the world. I've mentioned a little bit my institution in Canada in Waterloo, and it is also the Secretariat or the headquarters for the World Association. You can see that in the little blue text there. We're located about an hour and a half southwest of Toronto, if you know your Canadian geography. But we're one of many, many, many work integrated learning organizations around the world. We have our regional office in Japan. We have two representatives of that office here in the meeting today, Keiko-san, Rikichi-san. So we have partnerships and a network that extends around the world. Japan, we have an office in Thailand. There are strong associations in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and in Europe and in the UK. And of course, we have the Canadian Association, which is called CWIL Canada, and the Americans have an association called CEIA. So the point being that work integrated learning is not a unique concept, but it is something that is being developed, explored, expanded around the world, and it's wonderful to be part of that community. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit about the World Association. I've made reference to the fact that the Secretariat is at the University of Waterloo, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the executive. We have other executive members on the call. Keiko-san is on the executive, Rikichi-san, Bari, I see Bari from Turkey. He's also on the executive. So we have some wonderful representatives here today who can also help answer questions if you have any. But in a nutshell, the World Association is an association for institutions and organizations that are interested in this work integrated learning or work integrated education or cooperative education. It's called different things in different parts of the world, but it's basically that key concept. It is an association or a network of networks, and I showed you that map of the world and some of the networks that we work with. And basically what we do is it's a gathering place for people to learn about work integrated learning or co-op, have some professional development, network, exchange information and ideas at our various events, engage in research because we have an active research community, and participate in a range of events and activities that we have. You'll see along the bottom, when I say a network of networks, here are some of the associations that are national associations that are part of our network. So we really do see ourselves as a collaborative gathering space of individuals who are interested in this particular work. Next slide, please. So I think that how this, bringing it back to how work integrated learning, wherever it's practiced around the world or whatever you particularly call it, and just as a side note, in Canada, we've identified 9 different categories of work integrated learning. Cooperative education is one. If you go to the Canadian Association, that's CWIL Canada's website, all of those different types of work integrated learning are explained and defined. So it is a broad, it's a very specific type of program, but it's got a lot of flexibility within it with the ways that it's practiced. But how we see it addressing some of the challenges in the future of work is it really is a strategy to help with graduate employability, And data shows that students who go through work-integrated learning programs have higher rates of employment when they graduate. It also deals with entrepreneurship and innovation in the sense that students who are actively engaged in work-integrated learning programs tend to have higher interests in entrepreneurship and innovation. We've done some work and research here at the University of Waterloo on this and why is that the case? And what we've determined is that when a student goes on a work term, because in the case of Waterloo, most of our experiences are paid work terms in companies, they are then exposed to a range of problems and opportunities that companies are facing. And then when they go back to their classroom, they think about, hey, hang on, how could I solve that problem? What might be a solution? What might be an innovation? And that leads to a great deal of entrepreneurship. So out of the University of Waterloo, which is the largest co-op program, we have the highest rate of founders of companies in Canada because the students are graduating, having been exposed to all of these problems, given the skills and the confidence to deal with those problems, and in an environment that really supports entrepreneurship and innovation, they go off and do it. So the other challenge it solves or helps to address is many parents and governments are really wanting graduates to be employed, and I've already referenced that. So work integrated learning does help connect. One of the important goals for having a higher education system is that students will have jobs at the end of it. It's not the only goal, obviously. The primary goal is an education, but it's very helpful when that education is organized in such a way that can also lead to jobs. This also is a connection point for higher education and industry, which can help with financial pressures, which many higher educational institutions are facing right now, not to mention the relevance of higher ed, which also is being under scrutiny in various jurisdictions around the world. Technology and AI is disrupting all industries, including higher ed, and having students engaged in work integrated learning is one way to keep us on top of some of these changes that we can then also be bringing into our own institutions. There is an ongoing need for evidence and research, which is why I would encourage you to join the World Association and our research community, because it's always important to understand what we're doing and why. There's a need for quality, because it's one thing to say we're going to do these programs and for a university to develop something, but it's easy to do it in not a good way. And then the outcomes don't necessarily give the results you're looking for. So quality is important. And organizations need the proper resources. This work is not easy to do well. And so often I see organizations and institutions thinking that they can just throw this responsibility onto the desk of some faculty member and expect it to happen, and it will not happen in a good way. International student mobility is something that's a need, and a network is something that continues to be a need, which the World Association has programs to support those needs. So the next slide. Here we go. Okay, so I think I've spoken about many of these things. Here are some opportunities that we have for those involved in these types of programs who are interested in these types of programs. There's always room to advocate with government, with industry, and with others. If there's a national association in your region or a regional office, they are very well positioned to support the advocacy of these programs. We have resources. There's the International Journal of Work Integrated Learning and the Handbook for Work Integrated Learning, which is, these are excellent resources if you want to learn more. We have our association and our quality frameworks and other associations. For international student mobility, WACE has something called the WACE Global Challenge Program, where students can have a virtual micro work integrated learning experience. And of course, we have our events and conversations and our conference coming up in Istanbul, which I think the next slide. There we go. There we go, Barry. Barry is the chair of the conference committee, and we're very pleased to very pleased and honored that his institution is hosting us in Istanbul at the end of May. And would really encourage you, if you have any interest in this space, to come. This is where the global community gathers, and you'll meet all sorts of very, very interesting people from around the world doing fascinating work in this space at a beautiful location. Next slide, please. I'll give you a little bit about what we're doing in Canada, but I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I'm conscious of the time. But this is what we do at my institution and in Canada. We've been running the National Association, which is Seawell Canada, has been around since the 1970s, and it involves Canadian institutions involved in this space. You would be hard-pressed to find a Canadian university or college that does not have some form of work integrated learning or co-op program. Everybody's doing it, and we have a very strong national association where we support each other in doing our best work. Next slide, please. And I mentioned the 9 types that the Canadian Association has identified, and here they are. And again, there's much more information if you go to the Seawell website about each of these. And the dominant form that we use at the University of Waterloo is cooperative education, but we do have other forms of work integrated learning at the University of Waterloo. And I would suspect that at your institutions or what you're familiar with, you'll see many of these similar types of programs, and you may call them different things, but it's pretty common across the world. Next slide, please. What is key and foundational for any type, no matter which of those 9 you're talking about, is that there's the heart of quality, which there's a pedagogical piece. We call it PEAR, P-E-A-R, like the fruit. There's a pedagogical piece because it needs to, the whole point of these programs is connecting what students are studying to the world of work. And so there's pedagogy. The experience itself must be meaningful and substantial. You can't expect quality outcomes if you send someone off somewhere to sit in a corner for a week. That's not going to give you the outcomes that we want with work integrated learning. So intensity matters and the meaningfulness of the experience matters. There has to be assessment of learning, and that relates to the pedagogy. And there needs to be reflection, meaningful reflection. I think it was Dewey, somebody, I think it was Dewey, who said experiences without reflection don't lead to learning. So that's the other piece here, is that there must be thoughtful reflection on behalf of the students on what they're doing and why and how it matters for this to be a quality program. So that's a very simple schematic that we use to check to make sure what we're doing, no matter what we call it, is quality. Next slide, please. And here are some indicators. Is that there's different types of experiences. They offer meaning and purpose, and it really helps develop that lifelong learning. That's okay. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so the other very important piece, if you're thinking about work integrated learning within the context of your jurisdiction, is money. It helps a lot to incentivize employers to hire students. And we've been very fortunate in Canada to have a number of programs that do that. We have a very big program called our Student Work Placement Program, where companies get a wage subsidy, which gives them half of the salary for a student. This has been huge for us, and I think the Canadian government has invested $800 million or something like that over the course of the last few years on this. It's been very, very important. There have been some other funding opportunities and research grants, and in some provinces of Canada, we have tax credits that employers can apply for, and that also helps incentivize companies. Because in the case of our programs, all of our students earn a salary. So we want to make sure that they're earning a good salary, and these are ways that we support employers to do that. Next slide. Okay, and at the University of Waterloo, which is my institution, we've been, next slide, we've been doing these programs for a long time, 1957. This is a piece of a display that's in the foyer of my building, actually, and the building is in the backdrop of my slide here. As I mentioned, we'll go to the next slide. We are an hour sort of southwest of Toronto. The university itself has over 40,000 students in it. We're on a large campus with satellite campuses in local communities. We'll go to the next slide. And in the portfolio that I have the privilege of running, this is the ecosystem that brings it all together. Because I think this is another piece. Co-op programs or work integrated learning programs rarely work in isolation. Usually there's an ecosystem around them that make them really help. So, of course, we've got the co-op program, which is really large. We also have our career development staff, so that helps students as they're looking at graduating. We have the Center for Work Integrated Learning, which does other types of work integrated learning for those students that aren't doing co-op. And we also have a very large professional development skills program. We have a unit that works with international. We have the Work Learn Institute, which does research and consulting. We have the strategic enablement team, which makes it all come together. And of course, then we're also the Secretariat for the World Association. Next slide, please. We use a quality framework for all of our work, and this is an image of it. If you go to the University of Waterloo's website, you can find our white paper where we wrote this quality framework, and it's something now that has formed the quality framework for the Canadian Association and is also one of the pieces that informed our WACE global quality framework. So it's a very handy document if you want to read it. It basically talks about the aims of the 5 stakeholders, what they need to do, and how to measure achievements before, during, and after each type of work integrated learning experience. Next slide, please. The other innovations that we've had at the University of Waterloo, and this ties back to the future of work, as we've developed what we call the Future Ready Talent Framework. These are a set of 12 capabilities that we feel any student, no matter what they're studying, whether they are undergraduate or graduate students, need to be developing in order to be ready for the future of work. And you can find out more about that on our website if you want to learn more about what those capabilities are. Next slide. We have this model for work integrated learning. As I mentioned, cooperative education is our dominant form. We have other forms of work integrated learning, including graduate programming, and we have entrepreneurial co-op as well. Next slide, please. So we've been around in the co-op program, the first in Canada, 65 years of doing this. We have a very high employment rate. The students earn a lot of money every year because they are paid, so about 300 million a year in earnings. We have a number of employer partners, over 9,000 in over 75 countries. And students are about 24,000 students working every year, and they span every academic department, so 120 academic departments. So that's everything from the arts, the sciences, health programs, as well as engineering and business and math. Okay, next slide. The way it works typically at the University of Waterloo is like this. Students go on academic term, then they go on a work term, then they go on an academic term, then they go on a work term, and they alternate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until they graduate. This is the typical pattern for an engineering student. And so when the engineering students graduate, they have 6 4-month full-time paid work terms. So that's 24 months of relevant related paid experience by the time they graduate. And this is why they have those employment outcomes when they graduate. And each program is slightly different, but they all are the same in that there are multiple experiences. Students get to rate their work satisfaction, so we get a sense of how that's going for them as well. They are assessed and they reflect upon their future-ready skills. They get support from our team from beginning to end. Employers evaluate their performance, and this goes on their record so that it's a very serious evaluation that the employer provides. And we have a very large centralized system for managing the works. Next slide. And it is a very important driver for the University of Waterloo. So 74.3% of all of our undergraduate students are in the program. It's the #1 reason that students come to the University of Waterloo. And as a result, our program continues to grow much faster than the university enrollment overall. Next slide. 93% of our employers report a positive return on investment from hiring a student. We had Deloitte actually do a research study on the return on investment. So for every dollar an employer spent on co-op student salary, they reported a $2 economic gain to their bottom line from the value add that those students did on the work term. In our region alone, during that 1 year of study, the Waterloo's region GDP, the contribution by Waterloo co-op students for that year was $251 million. This shows the power of these programs when done properly and when you have employers that engage and embrace the experiences in a very wholehearted manner and really give the students meaningful and valuable work. Next slide, please. Here's some of our graduate outcomes. You can see that they're very high, and the salaries that students earn are much higher than what the typical Ontario, from my province of Ontario, would be gaining. So next slide, please. We also look at how the work terms impact the SDGs. We've started a research project since 2023, and actually we have new data that just came in about a week ago with over 16,000 employer responses coming in. Oh, it actually looks like that may be in this one too. But we basically asked employers, so the work your students did it have any impact on the SDGs? Did it relate to any of the SDGs? So that's the Sustainable Development Goals. And if so, which one? And then we asked students, the work terms you did they have any relation to an SDG? And if so, which one? So you can see the gold bar is what employers had to say, and the black bar is what students had to say. And it was a very simple survey. It's self-reported. We have not gone back to test, whether or not they were telling that actually did, whatever. It's self-reported. But you can see a very interesting distribution in the kind of work that our students and employers have been engaged in with respect to the SDGs. And my contention is that not only do students get jobs, and not only do they contribute to the bottom line of an employer, but they also are important agents for change as it relates to the kinds of impacts we want to see in the SDGs. Clean water and sanitation and sustainable cities and innovation. You can see it there. And this is from very high response rates. So the sample size is very large here, as you can see. Next slide, please. We've been very honored to win a number of awards for our work, which you can learn about if you want to later on. But that's the work of a terrific team on this wonderful program. So the next slide. And this is the last slide, really, is basically work integrated learning is a very powerful strategy. It needs to work in a number of different ways, whatever is appropriate for the context and with the employer community. Please consider joining our World Association, and I would hope that you would come and see us in Istanbul. And you could always contact me at the University of Waterloo if you want to learn more. And I think that's it. Next slide. Yes, thank you. And happy to take any questions.